The Broken. 2 years before the Dark Portal. Auchindoun's destruction signaled the death knell of the Draenei on Draenor. Though Velen and some of his people had survived, their culture was no more. They were refugees once again, but this time they were trapped in a dying world filled with the Burning Legion's agents. Velen ordered his artificers to reinforce Tel'Rador's defenses. The Draenei smiths constructed a network of arcanite crystals that shrouded the temple's presence from the Horde. As the months passed, Vindicator Marad and other Draenei survivors trickled into Tel'Rador. They spoke little of the horrors they had witnessed at Chatrath. They would carry those memories with them in silence, their hearts and minds scarred forever. Other survivors were burdened by more than just mental scars. Vindicators Akama and Nubundu were among the unfortunate Draenei who had succumbed to the Horde's red pox. The vile concoction had twisted their bodies, causing them to become smaller and shriveled. These cursed Draenei even found that their connection to the Holy Light had been severed. The Krokul, or the Broken, as some of these individuals were called, were not welcomed by the rest of their race. Tel'Rador's populace feared that the mutants would spread their affliction to healthier Draenei. Despite calls by Velen and Marad to accept the Broken, they were eventually driven from the refuge. Hakama, Nubundu, and the other Broken struck out into the vials to fend for themselves. The red mist affected some of them in different ways. The unluckiest of the Broken degraded into creatures called the Lost Ones. They became even more physically deformed, and they gradually lost their grip on sanity. This was the eventual fate that awaited every Broken. All that the mutants could do was hope to find some means to cure themselves or slow their degeneration. Other Draenei survivors would found enclaves across Draenor. Velen would later travel among these different safe havens, both to prevent himself from being captured by the Horde and to help his people however he could. Despite his efforts, the Draenei would live in constant fear of tomorrow. They never knew when the Horde might uncover their hideaways. Tel'Rador would remain the largest and most important of these sites. As time passed and fell energy continued killing the world, the sea around the island would dry up and form a swampy mire called Sangra Marsh. The Scouring of Draenor. As the orcs were wiping out the Draenei, Warchief Blackhand dispatched scouts to keep him apprised of Draenor's other civilizations. He planned to conquer them one day, but the destruction of the Draenei was paramount. Once Chatrath had fallen, Blackhand turned his full attention to the rest of the world's inhabitants. Chieftain Kilrog led the Bleeding Hollow on a campaign into Farallon, a lush island that served as the last bastion of the Primals. Its isolated location also made it one of the few places in Draenor that were fully unsullied by fell magic. The forests there were dense, but Kilrog and his followers were well adapted to fighting in such terrain. Reaching the island proved difficult. The orcs were not seafarers, and they relied on ogre shipwrights to build vessels capable of crossing the ocean. Once in Farallon, orc warlocks leached life from the primals and used the stolen power to set the forest alight. As the wilds burned, Kilrog and his army slaughtered every Botani and Janissar they could find. Meanwhile, the Warsong and Twilight's Hammer clans toppled the ogre bastion of Heimol. Chieftain Gromarsh and Shogal both took part in the siege, and both relished in the opportunity to slay ogres. For Shogal, the siege of Heimol was particularly gratifying. It was an opportunity to enact vengeance upon those who had exiled him from the city. He sought out and killed the stronghold's leader, Imperator Margok. Both were two-headed ogres. Both were gifted sorceresses. Yet, only Shogal had learned the secrets of fell magic and the void. Armed with these powers, he bound Margok to his throne and burned the rival ogre mage alive. Elsewhere, Blackhand tasked the Frostwolf, Thunderlord, and Whiteclaw clans with wiping out the world's Gron, Ogron, and Magnaron, as well as many ogres. Apart from the Heimol, Most ogres had already joined the horde. However, there were a few holdouts. Blacken had no interest in winning their loyalty. He had given them a chance to join him. Now, he wanted the brutes dead. The Frostwolves and the White Claws saw no honor in hunting down the Gron, Ogron, and Magnaron and ogres. They held most of their warriors back. Yet, Chieftain Fenris and his Thunderlords did not shy away from the task. They reveled in the slaughter of their ancient enemies. One of the few Gron to escape the horde's onslaught was known as Gruul. He lorded over a small number of ogres and Gron in Gorgrond. Gruul far surpassed the rest of his kind in brute strength and cunning. From his remote lair in the mountains, he fended off multiple Thunderlord assaults. Casualties grew so great that Fenris abandoned the attacks. The Fall of Skyreach. The High Arakoa in the Spires of Arak posed one of the greatest challenges to the Horde. This intelligent race had rediscovered ancient Apax's technology. From this knowledge, the High Arakoa had fashioned an immense cannon atop their lofty capital, Skyreach. The mechanism would harness the fiery power of the sun to defend their lands from the Horde. Warchief Blacken called on Kargoth Bladefist to deal with these Arakoa. The vicious chieftain formed an invasion force from the Shattered Hand, Burning Blade, and Dragonmaw clans. The lightly armored but highly mobile army stormed the forest surrounding Skyreach, but the invaders were not prepared for the High Arakoa's weaponry. Upon seeing the orcs approach, Skyreach's defenses ignited their cannon. A searing beam of fire exploded from atop Skyreach and lanced across the forests, incinerating dozens of orcs where they stood. Rather than mount another direct assault, Kargoth sought allies in nearby Terakar forest, outcast Arakoa. These wingless creatures hated Skyreach and its inhabitants. More importantly, they knew the High Arakoa's secrets. Kargoth struck a bargain with the outcasts. They would infiltrate the High Arakoa city and destroy their weaponry. Once they'd succeeded, the orcs would join the fight and slaughter the remaining High Arakoa. The outcasts can then claim Skyreach for themselves. Enticed by the offer, the outcasts snuck into Skyreach and waged war against the city. They did not have the numbers to defeat the High Arakoa, but that was not their purpose. Using their shadowy powers, the outcasts stormed through Skyreach and destroyed the mechanism atop the city. A blinding explosion tore through the sky, setting the heavens aflame. When Kargoth and his forces finally arrived, they slaughtered the High Arakoa and cast their bodies from the city. But they did not stop there. The battle-crazed orcs also turned on their allies and cut down the outcasts. Kargoth saw these wingless Arakoa as a threat. They were cunning and intelligent creatures. He assumed that they would one day learn to wield the same powers that the High Arakoa had. That was not a risk Kargoth was willing to take. What was more, he simply enjoyed betraying the wretched outcasts. Kargoth's followers did not kill every High Arakoa they came across. Some they took prisoner. Based on what the outcasts had told him of Sethic halls, Kargoth ordered that these captives be cast into the region's cursed pools. The chieftain reveled in the sight of High Arakoa writhing in agony as shadow energy transformed them into withered outcasts. In the end, the horde assault on the spires of Arak destroyed High Arakoan civilization and killed nearly all of the outcasts. Only a small number of the wingless Arakoa survived, including those who were recently hurled into Sethic halls. The outcasts shrouded themselves in the shadows, and they took refuge from the horde in the deepest corners of Terakar forest. The High Arakoa who had been transformed into outcasts banded together under the leadership of a former Skyreach guard named Grisik. He led his followers to Auchindoun, knowing that most orcs feared the haunted ruins. There, he nursed a bitter hatred for the horde, and he awaited the day when he might exact vengeance on those who had spilled the blood of his people. The Long Silence. During the attack on Shatrath, Kil'jaeden met with Sargeras and informed him of the orcs and his work corrupting them. The Legion's ruler was pleased by what he had learned. The orcs were an unstoppable force, infused with demon blood and loyal to the Legion. Yet, they were more than just another race conscripted into his army. Sargeras had been searching for the right weapon to weaken Azeroth's defenses in preparation for a full-scale Legion invasion. The Horde would serve as the perfect tool to do so. Sargeras ordered Kil'jaeden to cut all communication with his agent Gul'dan and the other orcs. They were flush with victory, and that made them arrogant and unruly. Sargeras wanted the orcs to be on the brink of self-destruction, so desperate that they would embark on any quest if it meant saving themselves, so desperate that they would journey to another world. Unaware of the Legion's plans, the orcs floundered on Draenor. They had conquered much of the world, but they were killing it in the process. Fel magic had transformed most of Draenor into a barren desert. Nowhere was this more apparent than in the Tanaan jungle. The region was now a cracked wasteland of red dust and bones. It became known as the Hellfire Peninsula, and the Horde capital at its western edge was renamed Hellfire Citadel. War Chief Blackhand knew that eventually the Horde would run out of water and food. He turned to Gul'dan for answers and demanded to know what orders Kil'jaeden had given him. Surely, the great benefactor had foreseen these events and would propose a solution. Blackhand didn't know the terrible truth. Kil'jaeden had stopped communing with Gul'dan. The Demon Lord's silence had come suddenly and without warning. Panic and paranoia had seized Gul'dan. Kil'jaeden had promised him godhood if he destroyed the Draenei, and the Wark Orlok had delivered his end of the bargain. Bitterness and anger consumed Gul'dan. He wondered if the Demon Lord had merely used him and the orcs as pawns to exterminate the Draenei. Gul'dan kept this development a secret from Blackhand. The Warlock's connection with Kil'jaeden gave him influence. If Blackhand knew Gul'dan was no longer communing with the benefactor, he would see it as a weakness and kill Gul'dan. For now, Gul'dan convinced Blackhand to wait while Kil'jaeden chose their path forward. In the year that followed, hunger took its toll on the orcs. They hunted most of Draenor's native creatures to extinction. The Dragonmaw turned on their trained Rylax and used them as a source of food, while Warsong Raiders did the same to their wolf mounts. The threat of starvation only made the orcs more agitated and aggressive. Bloodlust still seared through their veins, but they had no other foe to fight. Many orcs turned on each other. They clashed in short-lived battles that left hundreds dead. The Lightning's Blade, Whiteclaw, and Redwalker clans suffered greatly in these conflicts. Some clans lost themselves completely to the depths of madness. These included the Warsongs, the Bone Chewers, the Laughing Skull, the Shattered Hand, and the Thunderlords. To protect the rest of the Horde from these violent clans, Blackhand banished them from Hellfire Citadel. He drove these belligerent orcs into remote areas of Hellfire Peninsula where they could fight amongst themselves. That way, Blackhand could preserve some of the Horde's dwindling strength. But Blackhand and Gul'dan knew this was only a temporary solution to a much greater problem. Unless something changed, the Horde would devour itself. From afar, Sargeras watched the orcs spiral into uncertainty. Soon enough, they would find salvation. He had corrupted a vessel on Azeroth, an extraordinary individual whom he could use to launch the Horde's invasion of the world. This vessel was a human named Medivh, one of the most powerful magi in history.